Welcome to the weekend question of the week. Hey, this is Sindra, your neuro coach at Neuroforte Strategies, bringing you the question of the week. This weekend's question is around the topic of energy fluctuation and time management. I get asked this question a lot. Is one of the biggest questions that we have as neurodivergent individuals. But this question, I got it this week from one of our viewers, and it says as follows: Why does doing something small completely drain me? And how am I supposed to manage my time when my energy doesn't follow a clock? That is a very valid question and a very common question. Why is this question common among us? The reality is that for neurodivergent individuals, planning doesn't always equal productivity. In the weeks to follow, I will be explaining why planning doesn't always equal productivity in a more scientific way. But today, I'm going to explain it to you in a more practical way. I grew up around the ocean and the river. So I'm going to use nature as a practical way to show you how everything doesn't always follow a linear pattern. So we're actually functioning as neurodivergent as everything else in nature. As I explain this to you and propose it to you in this narrative, I want you to start thinking in details as I explain certain things. How do you function? And if you're sitting and you're close to a pencil, or if you're not, just next time watch this video over again and write down what feels natural to you. Not what you would like to be doing, but what actually feels natural to you. I mentioned about the ocean and rivers. Okay, let's analyze how the ocean works. Maybe you have never been to the ocean, or you have been just to the ocean with during a limited time and vacation, but I actually grew up around the ocean and I got to see how the ocean behaves naturally. The ocean is influenced by the time of the day. In the mornings, the tide might be at a certain point level. At midday, it might be at a certain level. And in the evening, it changes also. The tide and how we will say rough the ocean is also influenced by the weather and storm surges. And this doesn't always mean that the weather, there's going to be a storm right at the beach, but there might be a storm way out in the ocean, and it influences how the ocean behaves at the beach. Also, the moon and heat influences the ocean. It behaves differently when it's a very hot day, and it behaves differently when it's a cooler day. And it behaves differently. It has a different type of energy of how the ocean moves and the cycles, depending on the cycle of the moon. And during full moon, it behaves differently. And as the moon changes during the 28-day cycle, so does the behavior and the energy that the ocean has. Also, another thing that we can notice with the ocean is that um, the influence of what all these other factors have that I mentioned before takes hours. It takes time to work on how the ocean behaves. And the human influence that we have as humans to affect the ocean is very, very low. Now, let's look at the contrast with rivers. Rivers are affected by seasons. So, if you have been around the river long enough, you know that different seasons brings affects how much water the speed and the tides of rivers. So, for example, during rainy seasons, the river is going to behave differently. Also, it's going to behave differently um, after in the spring with snow runoff because it's getting an influx of this water and energy. So it's gonna the tides of the river, the banks, it's gonna overflow. It's gonna run faster. It's gonna have more energy because these things are affecting it. Also, gravity affects the river. What about gravity affects river? Well, if the river is flowing from the top of a hill or a mountain, when these other factors such as seasons affects it, then a river that is coming from a hill or the top of a mountain is going to have more energy because when that water starts coming down, it's going to push and push. Whereas a river that is a river that begins in flat land and it stays in flat land, the currents are going to be more steady most of the time. And even when it's affected by a large influx of water, by things that's happening in the weather or seasons, instead of going faster, it's actually going to spread out wider and it's going to have a little bit more energy, but that energy is going to be more at a steady level, more so than a big influx of um, energy and water and tide in the river. Something very peculiar that also rivers experience are fast bolts of energy. And this doesn't happen with the ocean. The ocean, when there is weather outside, um, it might take hours for you to notice it on the banks, on the beach. Whereas the river, if it rained, if there was a big storm or there was a big snow melt, that can happen within minutes and very rarely within hours. Sometimes it's also within a few hours, but usually this happens within minutes. Also, with rivers, human influence is huge. That whatever we do to a river, like dams, if there are dams that we place in the way of the river, it's going to affect the way how this river flows. Now, I want to think of yourself as a river or an ocean, or maybe you are both, right? Think about the energies and the flows that you usually have. And if you haven't paid attention to that, this is my challenge for you this week. I'm not going to overload you with homework, but I'm going to leave you this one homework. I want you for the next 7 days to take into account, and if you need to, write it down on your phone. All of us have a phone, right? You're watching me more than likely on a phone. I want you to make little voice notes or even use the notes app on your phone. And when you noticed it, just write it down. Use whatever method feels natural, whatever method feels works best for your brain, and whatever methods feels natural for your nervous system to write this down. So for the next 7 days, and we don't have to do it hour by hour. How I want you to do this is that when you rise in the morning, whatever time you wake up at the different days in the morning of the week, because it's going to be different on the weekend than during the week, or I don't know how your schedule is if you work during the week or if you own a business and you work on the weekends also, or you are a creative. Whatever it is that you do, when you wake up in the morning, leave yourself a voice note or write down. Pay attention to your energy level. Just check in on yourself. This is very important. Checking in on ourselves is very important as neurodivergents. So I want you to check in on yourself and assess your energy levels and how you feel. Then at mid morning, after you have had engage in whatever you do, after you wake up in the morning and you engage in whatever you do, have breakfast or whatever it is that your routine or not is. Have breakfast, whatever you, when you engage in what is considered work for you. About 10 in the morning, 10:30 in the morning, do another check-in and see what's your energy level like. Then your next check-in is going to be at mid-afternoon, about 3:30. And then check in again about 6 in the evening, and then check in again at bedtime, whatever that time is. And if you need to, just set yourself reminders. We have these electronics, right? Put these reminders on your clock. Um, hey, how are you checking in? I do that even for myself, to check in on myself. Hey, ask yourself a question. Ding ding. It's going to remind you to check in on yourself. And do this for the next 7 days. And next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. So, this is Cindra, your neuro coach at Neuro Forte Strategies. And this was an installment of the weekend question of the week, which is a time when you can send me questions and I will pick one according to what is the most popular or what I see my clients ask me the most. And I will be presenting the question here and this section every weekend and give you suggestions on how you can work with it and how you can work with your nervous system. I hope you have a beautiful and well regulated week. Subscribe below if you want to get more tips and understanding of